The Goddess is Calling. Are you going to pick up your phone and actually talk to her? Tonight, my guest, Karen Tate, joins me. Her new book called Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology, will be joining me to discuss not only her new project, but also the concept of the goddess and the goddess calling and what that means and where we are. And so hopefully this will be a really well done, real-time show, and we will get some good information out to you, and you can go afterwards and reflect on it and share it and move it out into the world in whatever way, shape, or form that means for you. Karen has been on my show before. She's a fantastic person to talk to. I love her energy, everything. She's so thorough in her research and what she does. It's very refreshing to have her here. I'm going to let her talk about the book and give us an intro into it and give us kind of an introduction to what the material is all about. I prefer to hear it from her mouth to your ears. Welcome, Karen. Thanks so much for being here. Are you with us?
I sure am. Thank you so much, Hillary, for having me back on the show.
Oh, yeah, very exciting. Well, you're an author, you're a speaker, you take people on tours to sacred sites. You also have your own radio show. So there's a lot of things I'd love to just get right off the bat and share with everybody and let them know where they can find you and read more about you as they're listening.
Okay, awesome. Where do you want to start?
Wherever you want. You pick.
Okay. Well, yeah, Goddess Calling is my third book. And the first one was Sacred Places of Goddess. And I took all of those travels that I did to sacred places and turned it into a book so that people would understand that, Goddess is across the globe. And sometimes that's hard for people to understand if they've only lived in the United States, if maybe they only have a Christian or a Jewish background. I know it was for me, because I grew up in the Bible Belt of New Orleans for the first 25 years of my life. And it wasn't until I moved out to California that I discovered that there was a feminine face of God. And you know what? That feminine face of God has been around about 30,000 years or more. So imagine, I was angry at first, when I found out that information had sort of been swept beneath the rug, and especially when you start to understand how important it is to society and what it has cost society, women and men alike, for not having a feminine face of God. And, my second book, Walking an Ancient Path, well, that I guess it started to explain, as I learned, I shared with others, what it's like going to sacred sites, the experience of being in these sacred places, also how you could take the sacred feminine and incorporate it into your personal life and into your community. But the third book, the newest one, Inspirational Messages and Meditations, I get a little bit deeper into this, and I talk about exactly what society is missing, not having a feminine face of God, what it's cost women, what it's cost men, politically, socially, spiritually, because it has cost us so much. And if we look out into the world and we see how the world is out of balance, and we understand what the sacred feminine is about, what those ideals are, we quickly learn that what's missing is those sacred feminine ideals. And if we had those in our society again, it liberates us from the oppression, the domination, the exploitation that so many of us are suffering from today.
Well, I think a lot of people have gotten on the bandwagon of the sacred feminine and really, trying to understand what the feminine is and to give it a face, don't you?
Yeah, I do. You know what? More and more people are into this, and quite honestly, some of them don't always understand its sacred feminine ideals, but they know that those ideals are missing in society. For instance, caring, sharing, partnership, equality, justice, negotiation, collaboration, supporting one another instead of competing with one another. All of those things that would make our society a better place, that would uplift women, that would cure this income disparity that we have between the 1% and the 99%, that would stop all of this hate mongering, this divisive language, the sexism, the racism, the homophobia, the immigrant bashing. All of this stuff would come to an end if we really were embracing ideals of the sacred feminine, as I described.
Yeah, and on the other end of that spectrum, don't you think that it comes down to also understanding the divine masculine as well? Because, we have we have kind of a renaissance happening with this level of consciousness, with people coming out with the sacred feminine and really making a solid attempt at understanding and practicing those elements that they recognize as missing. And then what happens is, as we strengthen the feminine, the masculine has to step up to the plate as well, because they're so used to being with such a dysfunctional and disempowered feminine energy, don't you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're working with a disempowered feminine and an out-of-balance masculine. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to really make a point clear. This is not about throwing away the sacred masculine, okay? This is about honing the sacred masculine into a healthy sacred masculine. Because, if we want to talk, from a spiritual perspective, the teachings of Jesus fit hand in glove with the teachings of the sacred feminine. I often talk in metaphor when I teach groups, and I say, imagine this. Sacred feminine, divine masculine, God, goddess, call them whatever you want to call them. Yahweh, Jesus, Mary, Isis, whatever you want to call them. They're sitting in their rocking chairs up there in heaven, and they're looking at each other, and they're saying, you know what? Why did our children ever divorce us? And the sacred feminine sort of scratches her head, and the divine masculine says, well, you know what, honey? I think you're making a comeback. Because we have a masculine that it goes back to the Bible. Okay, if we have a society whose mythology is only knows or sees a male god, then we end up with a society that has male domination, male authority, male leadership. So where does that leave the rest of us? The Bible has really given a lot of people license to think that the resources on the planet, the species of the planet, the female gender on the planet are here to serve man and to serve God, rather than the female and the male being in partnership, in equality together, in an egalitarian society, actually being wise stewards of the earth. But things have gotten sort of out of control. We have predator capitalism, we have exploitation, domination, oppression, and that's the out of balance masculine. What the masculine really needs to come into is not its warrior dominator aspect. We've done too much of that for too long. The masculine needs to move more into a protector mode. It needs to step back and let the sacred feminine step into an empowerment and shine and grow and have those ideals take root and grow in society alongside the healthy masculine. And when we do that, we will have a society that works for all of us and not just the people who, have their boot on our neck.
Yeah, it's overwhelming when you think about it, how much we've really grown so apart from our inner divinity that it's almost like this gigantic journey we have to take back to kind of reconnect it. And then once we do it for ourselves, we have to learn how to reconnect that in partnership or relations, with other people, not just ourselves. Do you see, do you address that in your new book, talking about, you mentioned partnership briefly, how people, claim this this divinity within themselves and balance it with the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And then, when they start to reach out in relation with other people, what happens when they first start to do that?
Well, it's a difficult thing, sometimes because, things are so polarized today. And you wonder, how can I possibly reach across the aisle to somebody who believes, women deserve to have vaginal probes put up their yonis because, they dare exercise their right to an abortion, or don't want women to have access to contraceptives, or believe that women should be submissive to their husbands, or believe that the rich should keep getting all of these tax breaks while, other poor people have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to put food on the table. It's hard to think about, well, how do we reach across the aisle to find some common ground? But you know what? It is so important. And I think if we really take the time and get to know one another, I think we discover that we do have some things in common, even if it's just a little bit. If you have just a little bit, you can build on that. You find a little bit of common ground, and then before you know it, you find other things that you have in common. But, I think the powers that be out there, the corporate-controlled media, they have a vested interest in keeping us divided, because if the American people ever decided to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity, we could I think we could get past a lot of the things that are, that's causing so much suffering in the world.
Yeah, corporate media, the mainstream media is a complete scam. I think all of my listeners know that. I think a lot of people are coming into the realization that the mainstream media is nothing more than a scripted, play, so to speak, of what, the leadership of this country wants people to focus their energy and thoughts and emotions on, versus really bringing up the topics that are necessary for us to be a cohesive country where we can actually deal with the real stuff going on. There is so much push into superficial, and we get the cultural programming from TV. Most of the masses do. I mean, of course there are those people that don't have a TV, don't pay attention to the headlines, but we are not the majority. We are the minority, and the majority of people live by that hook, line, and sinker. And what happens is then what happens is they become the majority energy generators, kind of, if you look at energy from a perspective such as I usually talk about is, we have our thought, we have our emotion energy, our thought energy, and we produce that, and it aligns with the electromagnetic energy that our body produces. And so we end up becoming these creators of whatever, and when we are kind of in this group of like-mindedness with other people, we are that much bigger and that much bigger. That's why spiritual groups work. But when you have a large group of masses, the majority of people tuning into what they tune into the frequency, getting that fear-based energy churned up and going, you have tornadoes that rip across countries. You have things that happen. The environment is reactive to us. We are not separated from that. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've come to understand in exploring my own divine femininity, is the fact that we are so super connected to the big Mom Earth, that there is nothing that we don't do that she doesn't feel necessarily in the terms of the unseen. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with everything you just said. Our interconnectedness, I think the Hindus called it the sea of being. It's like the web of all of life, and we are interconnected. But, Christianity comes along. The pagans used to believe that sort of thing, and then Christianity comes along, and they teach their converts that, the physical world, the material world is not sacred. It's really unimportant. You should be focused on where you're going to go after you die, kind of a thing, because you're going to be in heaven with Jesus, and everything's going to be glorious. And so as a result, the earth is no longer sacred, so we don't take care of it. Women are no longer sacred. So look at what we have. We have female genital mutilation, we have domestic violence, we have sex trafficking, and we believe that we can really draw a connection, connect the dots between the fact that we lost the feminine face of God to even stuff like what I just described, and the fact that women don't, their time is valued so much less than men that they don't even make equal pay for equal work. Former President Jimmy Carter has a wonderful new book out, A Call to Action, I believe it's called. And, he talks about the discrimination against women around the globe. And he says that it's one of the biggest sins that nobody's talking about, because he even left his church because he said that, women are being deprived of the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. So it is really important that, people like us, we stay focused, we stay in sort of our elevated consciousness if we can, and not sort of succumb to that negativity. And, we might be the minority, Hillary. I'm not sure if we're the minority, but if we are the cognitive minority. And I think that's a very proud place to be, because the cognitive minority is the group of people who have the answers for the future, and we're just sort of waiting for the rest of mainstream society to catch up. You think back to when, the pagan scientists were trying to tell the church that the earth wasn't flat, or that the planets are revolved around the sun. They were the cognitive minority of their time. You think of the founding fathers who set up our Constitution, and they knew the importance of separation of church and state. A lot of them were Freemasons, which meant they also knew the importance of the balance between the sacred feminine and divine masculine. They were the cognitive minority of their time. Now, we are the cognitive minority, and I think we just have to hold on, and I think we are birthing more and more of us. You've heard that 100th monkey idea, the morphic field theory. It doesn't take the majority of us to shift the consciousness. We just, we have to know that and believe that and stick with this.
I'm glad you said that, because that's why I brought it up, because I believe that what we're dealing with is a different understanding of consciousness and energy than we've ever really had before. So when we talk about the minority versus the majority, or the Democrats versus the Republicans, or blacks versus whites, women versus men, we're actually beginning to transcend that duality and not really see it that way. And so when the perceived minority actually becomes, those consciousnesses, those sparks of light, those star seeds that can actually generate that much energy out into the world, where we don't need to be the majority according to numbers. Right. We just need to be true to who we are and stay centered in our heart, and begin to understand this. If you want to call it a science, great. We begin to understand the science of consciousness and the soul, and how this all works, and we tie into the environment and really how we're super connected to everything.
Well, and I think something else important, Hillary, is when something bad happens, we have to not freak out. We have to say, you know what, we have to have a certainty that this is all part of the divine plan, that there was a reason for it, that there was a gift in it. And let me tell you what I mean. Think about what happened when the economy collapsed and we had the Occupy movement on the street. And you have all of these people that started picking up that theme of the 99% versus the 1%. People started to realize that we are in this together. They started to see it was important to think about the whole, we really have to do what's best for the most of us. And I really think the fact that so many people are hurting right now, it is in a way a blessing in disguise, if you will. I think the silver lining in the cloud is there is solidarity forming, because there are more and more people who understand that we are in this together, and we have to have a society that that embraces caring and sharing and partnership. We can't have multinational corporations raping the earth and poisoning the water. We have to stand together to fight for regulation that's going to help climate change. We have to stand together and care what happens to our neighbors down the street. I do think it's bringing us closer together as human beings. I think in our collective angst, our collective suffering, if you will, our collective struggle to see things so out of balance. I think it's shifting consciousness more. I think it's becoming more about the we and the us rather than staying the way it's been for so long, the I and the me.
I love that, because that's one of the things that, I've been catching too on the collective ether field is this we, moving from the I to the we, and becoming an empowered, unit versus just this, individualized creation or whatever you want to call it. So, the goddess calling, are we hearing her? Do we listen? What do we really need to do at this point in time specifically to really get ourselves on track?
Well, I have a number of different messages in the book, and about 15 or 20 meditations too that really sort of help you go within. Let me just grab the book. And that way I can give you some examples. For instance, some of the meditations, one of them has as its focus the Egyptian lion-headed goddess, Sekhmet. And we talk about her being an archetype that helps us transform and become the best that we can be. Then there's Fortuna, and in the meditation you go to her sacred sanctuary of manifestation. There's a Kuan Yin healing meditation, and the Isis meditation taking you to the temple of ancient wisdom, or the sleeping goddess of Malta meditation about valuing our dreams and our inspiration, and the Aphrodite meditation about our true beauty and self-worth. Those are just a few, so it really sort of helps change us within. Because you realize once you understand what Goddess is about, especially for women and for men trying to understand the sacred feminine within themselves, you can start to develop that. You can start to value things that maybe patriarchal society had told you were not important, that we shouldn't care about, like the values I keep repeating because it's so important, intuition, inspiration, caring, sharing, justice, partnership, balance, peace, those things. And then I have about 20 messages that talks about harmony from chaos, the quest for love and wholeness, gratitude and appreciation. There's one I really love called Goddess Notices, and I talk about some times in my life where I was certain that there was a consciousness, a presence out there who showed herself, so we don't have to have doubt, or about embracing the other, people not like ourselves, so that we can become more, more closely aligned with our human family. Hope and fearlessness, compassion. I have a really fun message in here comparing the ideals of Star Trek with goddess ideals. People just love that one. We didn't, we don't often think about that, but if you're an old Trekkie and you think about it, you'll get it, balance in all things, our real wealth, resolutions, and return of the light. So, there's lots of great inspirational stories that I think are very humorous and uplifting that give us an idea of, how we can live our lives, the values that we should start embracing, the things we should reject that will, uplift our own lives personally, because because you know how it is, that old saying, when you're on the airplane and the mask falls down, you got to put the mask on yourself first before you can help anybody else. And, that goes for this too. We have to heal ourselves. We have to become the best that we can be. We're all works in progress. None of us are perfect, but we're on a journey, and it's really exciting. I think we are living in an incredible time. Women are more empowered than they've been in a very long time, and I think the next decade is going to be an incredible wild ride.
I do too. I'm hopeful about it. I really have a vision that, despite all of the turmoil and the transitional times, when we go from one thing to another, there's always a little upheaval or, chaotic type of energies that we experience. And certainly in the collective, that's no different. The earth goes through her cycles. She goes through her transitional periods, and we're a part of that. So we, of course, will see that reflected all the way down to the microcosm of our lives, getting up and going to work and having the challenges that we have in our space. You have an interesting concept about Eve and Mary Magdalene that I was hoping you could touch on as I was looking over your website for tonight's show. You talk about her, and you have some really powerful statements, and I would love it if you could share some of those with us.
Well, honestly, I'm embarrassed, Hillary. Do you have them in front of you? Could you read them to me so you can refresh my memory?
I sure do. It's on your website under Story Angles. For anybody listening, if you'd like to go to KarenTate.com, you can follow along here. Let's see what we have. We have From Prostitute to Priest, Mary Magdalene. Right. Why has the Da Vinci Code really struck such an interest in millions of readers? You talk a little bit about this book and how it's kind of invited us to really step into the exploration of the feminine energies. But then, you have one person who writes a book like this, Dan Brown writes a book like this, and then suddenly it's the new hype and everybody wants in and all this other stuff starts to bloom out of it. But does he take it far enough? I mean, does he give us enough information to really make a full assessment of that energy, do you think?
Yes.
I'm just curious.
He got a lot of backlash for that book, but you know what? There were a lot of truths in that book. Whenever something comes out that that's about the sacred feminine, or it comes out that doesn't smack of Christianity, there's always a backlash. I don't know if you remember when the great movie Avatar came out. Well, Avatar, that was like Goddess Church as far as I was concerned. But, you had a lot of Christians who were really upset with it because it showed the corporations as the predators that they are. It showed, how the sky people who were the earthlings were, coming to this other planet, and they were going to rape this planet for its natural resources. And who were the good guys in the movies? The good guys were the tree huggers, the ones that they call the hippies, and they were so interconnected with the earth and each other. It was beautiful, And I remember when the main character knelt at the foot of their sacred tree, which represented their goddess, and he said, the sky people, they destroyed their world, and they're coming for us tomorrow. Please help us, Mm-hmm. I'll never forget that. I still get goosebumps, because in the end, they won. And I sort of see us like that. But, to get back to, us meaning the cognitive minority, but to get back to your questions about Eve and Mary Magdalene and the Da Vinci Code and all of that, well, many people believe that Mary Magdalene may have been Jesus' wife. There's lots of reasons to believe that. In fact, the story where, they're at the wedding and, they go up to Jesus because they're running out of wine, or I believe it was to Mary because they were running out of wine. If they were just guests at a wedding, why would anybody have come up to Mary or Jesus and said they were running out of wine unless it was their wedding? wedding. You know what I mean? You don't go up to your guests and say, help us, we're running out of wine. So that's just one little thing. But, if scholars know that when they look back at the real history, that women were at the center of Christianity. And Mary Magdalene was one of those women. In fact, there were many women who had assets that were helping finance Jesus' ministry. And we also know that in early Christianity, it looked very different than the Christianity we know now. It was sort of a liberation theology kind of religion that attracted women because they weren't second-class citizens in the beginning. It attracted slaves because they could be free. It attracted the poor. That was in the beginning, and then things shifted. We also know that in the ancient world there were a lot of countries where women had a lot of rights and a lot of assets. And we see that a lot of churches were actually built by wealthy women benefactors. So in the beginning, things really were different. And Mary Magdalene is kind of a symbol for what the church has sort of kicked to the curb. She's become a symbol of a woman who has a sexuality. Because let's face it, patriarchy wants the benign, submissive woman like Mary, the mother of Jesus. Somebody who's not going to make waves, somebody that's just going to, kind of go with the flow instead of, kicking up some dust if, things aren't exactly right. Mary Magdalene sort of represents, women reclaiming their power in the church, reclaiming their sacred sexuality, reclaiming a wholeness. Because if you put Mary, the mother of Jesus, together with Mary Magdalene, well, suddenly you have a whole woman instead of, either of them without the attributes of the other, if that makes sense. And Eve, Eve was Adam's second wife. How many people know that Adam had a first wife, Lilith? And Lilith got kicked to the curb when Lilith expected to be equal to Adam. She said she was not going to lay under him. She was not going to be subservient to him. So Eve becomes Adam's second wife, but Eve got a horrible bum rap too, because suddenly, all the ills of the world are put on Eve's shoulders. Why? Because she, wanted to taste the fruits from the tree of knowledge. Why not understand what the mysteries are? And so again, this is all this sort of patriarchal spin that sort of sets up woman to be the bad guy, woman to be the one that tempts man to do bad things. We see in Eve, that's when sexuality starts to be something ugly too. And again, remember, Christianity said the material world is not sacred, so that also means sexuality is no longer sacred anymore. In the Da Vinci Code, well, the Da Vinci Code, as I said, had a lot of important points in it, and I think it introduced a lot of people to the idea of a goddess. I got a lot of phone calls and emails from people who had never heard of a goddess before, and suddenly they're hearing all of this about how, the reality of the past, that, pagans could be killed if they didn't convert to Christianity, and, how Mary, how the goddesses sort of just pass their baton off to Mary, and they learn about the goddess Isis, and, they're introduced to this idea that, maybe Mary and Jesus did have a child, and maybe there is a bloodline. I think if nothing else, it gets people talking and thinking, because patriarchy wants a bunch of sheeple that are not going to use any critical thinking, that are not going to question. They want people who are just going to go along and go along and go along, even if it means they're being lied to, even if it means they're oppressed, dominated, and exploited. They don't want knowledgeable people because they ask too many questions. It upsets the apple cart.
It sure does. It sure does. I mean, we've seen that effect in a lot of different places in different ways. Some subtle, not so subtle. And I think it's going to continue to do that as we move forward in time, in the way, because our planet just has to become sustainable. We don't have any other choice.
Right.
The Earth is not going to die. She's going to shake us off like a bunch of fleas eventually. I mean, if the nature works. I mean, one of the things I've been really enjoying looking into lately is this super connectivity, just like you talked about in Avatar. The indigenous had a way to tap into that connectivity so that they could better be, at one with the environment around them. They could live sustainably. They could have that relationship on all levels, physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual. And they were successful at that. It's also interesting that film did not get the recognition it should have gotten, just for the reasons that you stated, because it showed people something that really, if they watched it and got it, would make them think about themselves in a deeper level. And really, the whole point of that mass control is to keep people on a superficial level, so you never really go past skin deep. You never really get into who you are, or who another person is, or who your family is, or who your community is, or who your sisters and brothers are. God forbid, you go past the skin deep and you start to develop those really in-depth relationships. Has anybody ever tried and had the kind of failure that we've all experienced on some level? And sometimes we become successful at that, and the more we practice, the more we become successful at maintaining that depth and being able to enjoy and also explore together what's there.
I think one thing about the sacred feminine is she really kind of encourages us to be the best that we can be. It's not about keeping us dumbed down. And with the movie Avatar, the Pope was so upset about the positive feedback from the movie, he actually had one of his spokespersons come out and say nature will never replace religion, because it was really, like you said, really making people think about another way of looking at things. The sacred feminine is about a new normal, and you look at a lot of the sacred feminine myths, and I'll just throw out a couple real quick that give us a benchmark for new ways to live. You look at the myth of Demeter and Persephone, for instance. The myth of Demeter and Persephone, the pre-patriarchal myth, is really about mothers and daughters, that they have healthy relationships, that they respect one another. And I like to say, by extrapolation, that is about women having healthy relationships, not about competing with one another, supporting one another, empowering one another. Then you have the myth of the Inuit goddess Sedna, and I have this stuff in my book, so you can go and you can read this. Sedna is an Inuit goddess. What is an Inuit goddess? Well, the Inuits are indigenous people, like in Alaska or the icy waters of Newfoundland and Greenland. These indigenous people who depend on the animals of the sea for their sustenance, for their food, for their skins, for their blubber, for their, their teeth to make sharp objects, to make tools. Well, the Inuit goddess Sedna, who's the environmental goddess, she says, okay, humanity, you can have access to the sea creatures, but you only get what you need. Because as soon as you start to get greedy, as soon as you start to exploit, I'm going to cut you off, and you're going to have nothing. You are not going to have access to these animals anymore. You will be punished. So she puts out that message: don't exploit, don't be greedy, just use what you need so that there will be enough, for everyone. The goddess Isis, she hands the Egyptian pharaoh Ma'at, and what that means is it is by her authority that the pharaoh, the male, is being enabled to rule the people. Now, it's the female giving the male the right to rule, but she says you will rule using the ideals of the goddess Ma'at. And what is Ma'at? Ma'at is truth and justice and fairness awareness. And, so she is telling, the Pharaoh that, you are only ruling because the sacred feminine tells you could rule, and you have some rules that you have to live by so that you are a just ruler, And, there's the political goddess, Libertas, who stands in New York Harbor. Her image, this isn't just a contemporary creation. The Romans deified virtues on the Aventine Hill in Rome way back then. And, Lady Libertas has been a deity, for that long. And people look to her image, look to her archetype as a role model about the values that we should be embracing in our society. So you see, I could go on and on, with these different things that show you how the sacred feminine really does give us values to live by, and thereby, setting us free from patriarchal domination and exploitation and oppression.
It's such an amazing thing to hear somebody say that, and and you're so clear and articulate with how you say it. I hope everybody listening is getting like little jolts of energy into their brain listening to your voice, because it's really powerful. And if you can take what you're hearing, everybody listening, if you can take what you're hearing and you can somehow transform that into some applicable way of going out into your life and manifesting and experiencing that, then we've actually accomplished something. Because I'm a real big believer that sitting around and reading things and just kind of, not actually moving out and doing them is where we're going to be shifting into. We are really, really good, especially in this country, in the United States, at sitting around and being tabletop researchers and or armchair researchers and going into these places in our minds. But we have to learn how to bridge them down into our heart, and then we have to make it experiential. We have to go out and we have to reach out and we have to, do the work, because otherwise we're just really not doing it. Don't you think? I mean, don't you think we've kind of reached that space, Karen, where humans have to
stop thinking about it. We have to start doing. I mean, when it comes to caring and sharing, how many of us even know our neighbors' names, or if the little old lady down the street who's living on Social Security, maybe toward the end of the month, she doesn't even have enough money for food. Why not bake her a casserole, we go to Starbucks, maybe some of us go every day. Well, go one less day a week and take that money from the first and second and third week of the month, when you didn't go, take the cost of 4 coffees and donate it to a cause. Or find something that you are passionate about. Maybe it's GMOs. Maybe it's how Republicans are trying to prevent people from voting. Maybe it's animal cruelty. There's so many, maybe it's battered women's shelters. There's so many causes out there. Find something that you really feel passionate about and help. Volunteer. If you don't have money, you can volunteer of your time. We have to, not that Facebook is a bad thing, but we've got to spend less time on Facebook just bitching about things and actually get out in the world and do something.
It's kind of like the virtual.
If it means just, taking responsibility for our own education. Do fun things. Start a book club. Get together with your friends and, go get Goddess Calling. And, talk about the different chapters, or invite people to come to your house and have a little mini spiritual service. That's what the Christians used to do. That's how Christianity started, in women's living rooms. Or, have a movie night and show documentaries that uplift and empower and educate us so that we become more informed. So when some crazy politician is talking smack on TV, we know when he's lying to us and we don't vote for him.
Well, or we can see, I think what's happened, with Obama is we've seen that progression of, the masses falling in love with him, being seduced and swooned and just kind of enchanted, I guess is the right word, into his campaign and who he was and what he represented. A lot of people fell into that. A lot of people wanted to believe it, they wanted to believe it. And the person he was running for, was perceived as, well, we definitely don't want that. So we were all funneled into kind of choosing this. But I don't think it really matters anyway, because personally, I think all of that stuff is rigged anyway. So no matter what you vote, it ends up being what the machine wants anyway. But, now we see him as I think people are seeing through him. I think they are seeing through the phoniness, through the campaign smiles, through the poster child, talk. And they're really just saying, you know what? I am so sick and tired of our system. We want authentic. We want people who are real. It's almost like we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater with our system and start from scratch, but nobody has a clue what to do and where to go from that. Nobody's offering an alternative solution because we really just don't know what to do, don't you think?
Well, I have an opinion about that. And I think when Obama got elected into office, I think we thought, okay, we can sit back and relax now, and he's going to take care of it, and it's all going to be fine. And he ended up getting bombarded with stuff like the economy collapsing and trying to get the health care passed and all of that. And I think, I wish he had sort of kept everything in place that he had during the campaign to sort of promote his ideas once he got into office. Because I've been following this all really closely, and believe me, I am not here to say that the Democrats are perfect. They're not, because they are corporatists too. But I have watched year in and year out how every time we try to get anything worthwhile passed for the American people, the Republicans always block it. We spent the first 2 years trying to get Obamacare passed, and then we had the midterm elections. And when the midterm elections came in, Republicans filled the Congresses, and the Congress and the Senate. We didn't have a Democratic majority anymore, so the Republicans were able to block everything. I mean, just like yesterday, they blocked getting the minimum wage done. They were blocking stuff that they used to vote for, like, money to make sure, to protect women from domestic violence. They've blocked things like equal pay for women. It's always, the Democrats, even though they're corporatists, they will at least put forth policies that help the worker. The Republicans tend to always put forth policies that help the employer, But the problem is we need campaign finance reform. When the Supreme Court, because we have a majority of conservatives in the Supreme Court, as soon as they passed Citizens United and corporations were people, well, that made it so though the richest people in the country were really the ones that were controlling the dialogue. We have, corporations that are actually writing the laws. And because the politicians need so much of that corporate money to run for office and stay in office, they become pawns of these corporations rather than serving the people. So I think one of the most important things we need is campaign finance reform, because it doesn't matter if somebody great like Marianne Williamson or somebody from the Green Party, or even if we started an eco-feminist party, it wouldn't make any difference under the current situation we're under, because they need so much money to compete with advertising and all of the things it takes to pass laws and run a campaign. They can't possibly compete without corporate money. We have to be like Europe. Europe doesn't have this crazy system, where politicians have to run for office, for 2 years before the election, and, they need these billions of dollars to run. I mean, all this does is set it up so that the richest, or own the politicians who are calling the shots for the richest people in the country. You see what I mean? So, even if we found good people, they would never make it to the point where we could vote for them, because with the current, way things are, needing so much money to run, they would never have enough money, because the corporations aren't going to give them money. They're not going to give money to somebody who cares about the workers, who cares about the environment, because that's going to cost the corporations money.
Yeah, we
they're
work
going to support
ourselves into
people who are going to put more money in their coffers.
Yeah, we have definitely, and that's a good point, we have definitely worked ourselves into a corner. And it's kind of like, well, which way do we go now? Well, you really have to remove the whole wall, because you have just, and I say you, I mean all of us, we've all kind of worked ourselves into this corner by allowing the systems, and we didn't really know any different. I mean, we've been so fragmented as people that we're now we're finally starting to heal that fragmentation. We're finally starting to come into our wholeness and to understand the interconnectivity. And as we do that, we sort of see how, even though it was, yes, maybe deemed not exactly what we should have been doing, but it was necessary to the growth of what has been the catalyst behind us becoming more whole than before. And that's how I see the human psyche has been fragmented by so many disconnected means that we really have had to put ourselves back together, like Humpty Dumpty. We have to put ourselves back together and create the cosmic egg, and then we have to birth it, and what comes out of it is really up to us, but so the goddess energies and how the feminine can come in with the intuition and with the comfort of being, instead of always having to do and go, go, go. Working with balancing the male masculine energies and the female energies within us, the being and the doing, and making sure that we are taking ourselves to a new level of self-care. I think it's really important right now, as we just go easy on ourselves and not have to put all this pressure on us to be so perfect right away. I think we forget that practice makes perfect love, and eventually we will get there, and we are already there in a sense, but it's kind of like our minds and hearts have been disconnected for so long because of the cultures that we've been raised in, generations after generations, that we actually have a lot of work to do to help put that all back together for the descendants to come, the generations to come, people who will be born and raised in the world that we leave behind. And if we reconnect the goddess and we reconnect the Godhead, because let's face it, the masculine energy that most of this planet worships is an idea of a man or a god or patriarchal god. It's not even, an actual thing they can grasp. It's a concept that they have to wrap their minds around, and in some cases their hearts. I mean, for some people it really has made a difference and has brought positivity to their life. God bless them. And for others, it's brought a lot of pain and a lot of separation. And whatever your experience of that male god entity is, we also have a lot of healing to do with that, because it's been spoon-fed to us that this is the way we relate to a patriarchal figure. And I believe that it's not only out of balance, but I believe that it's also it's not as evolved as it could potentially be. A lot of men on this planet have a lot of healing to do because they haven't been able to express their feminine qualities without being seen as one or other or this or that. I mean, they haven't been able to really grasp into their creative potential, because in order to do that, you really have to be able to step into the heart. You have to be free and clear. There've been so much responsibility put onto men. They become these kind of, well, you're the main breadwinner and you have to go out and support your families and you're responsible for all this and put this all on your shoulders. And that hasn't necessarily been fair, I don't think, so much. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think you said it. I said it really well, and and I think it goes back to the idea the solution is partnership. The men should be able to be their authentic selves too, and they have been denied the part of themselves that is the nurturer, that is the person that cares and shares, that can that can use his inspiration and intuition intuition and, be that creative self that comes from the heart. Patriarchy sort of, I think, beats that out of boys. They have to be rough and tough, and if, they got to like football and hunting, and if that's not what they like, well, there's something wrong with them. They're effeminate, or where really, I think the new Renaissance man is the man who is his authentic self, and he allows himself to care and share and nurture, but we've been told in this society that those things are weak. That those things aren't important. Those aren't the most important things to value. And so what do we end up with? We end up with this dog-eat-dog society where it's about survival of the fittest. And if I could just real quickly, Hillary, mention the documentary Femme, because it ties right into this. I was lucky enough to be a part of it and sort of carry the goddess message about the importance of the we and the us instead of the I and the me. I would really encourage your listeners to go on the web and look for Femme the movie, or you can also find it from my website, KarenTate.com. And it talks about a lot of this. It puts it into perspective. It would be a great thing for a movie night. It talks about how in ancient times we had a goddess and women were revered, and then patriarchy comes into the picture, and it hurts women and it hurts men, and but it offers solutions. It doesn't just complain about the problems, but it does explain how we got here, But it talks about the solution is really partnership, and from partnership we can get to love. And it was executive produced by Sharon Stone, the actress, and Emmanuel Atier of Wonderland Entertainment. It's an incredible film with Marianne Williamson, Jean Houston, Rianne Eisler, Jean Shinoda Boland, and other women from all around the world, talking about the importance of the feminine, of, women, having equality in society, being in partnership with men, and men understanding that they have to incorporate that sacred feminine into themselves. And, if we could be in partnership with ourselves, then we can then be in partnership with each other, whether we're talking about our friends or corporations creating more of a win-win dynamic, and governments creating more of a win-win dynamic, because we really got to get away from this winner and loser paradigm.
We do.
We
absolutely do. We are, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I hate to do that. But really powerful, wise words to close on tonight's show with. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and for continuing to do it, and for sharing it with all of us.
Thank you, Hillary.
Okay, everyone. Next week, we have Barbara Hand-Clow. She's coming out of semi-retirement just to talk to all of us. It's very exciting. She'll be here talking about her new book that's been retitled, as well as a brand new genre and book that she's got coming out. Very exciting. Lots going on in the world, and I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Until then, everyone, namaste. Good night.